They erased me from the family for decades, but when they crawled back to my empire, I made sure they regretted every second. My name is Rachel Morgan. I'm 41 years old, and if you had asked me a decade ago what silence feels like, I would have said it was a gift. Silence meant freedom. Silence meant no more cutting words, no more comparisons, no more reminders that I had been the unwanted shadow in my own family. But on a cold winter night in Boston, silence was broken by something I never thought I'd hear. Again the sound of my doorbell. It was past midnight. The city outside my window was nothing but frost and empty streets. My penthouse overlooked the harbor, glass walls reflecting a life I had built, brick by brick, dollar by dollar, wound by wound. I was alone, curled up with a glass of wine and the latest quarterly report of the company I founded. When the chime cut through the stillness. At first, I thought it was some mistake. No one visits me unannounced, especially not at this hour. I live in a building where the lobby staff filters out every salesman, every lost delivery, every intruder. For a moment, I considered ignoring it, but the bell rang again, and something inside me told me to look. I reached for the control panel on my desk and tapped the security feed. And that was when my past came back to life. On the camera stood the faces I had buried 20 years ago. My father, Charles, once a towering figure of pride, now stooped, his shoulders bent under age and something heavier. My mother, Marianne, clutching her purse as if it were a lifeline, her eyes darting nervously at the camera as though she wasn't sure she'd be recognized. Behind them, my brother Daniel, the former golden boy, thicker in the waist and thinner in confidence, shifting from one foot to the other like a man who had gambled and lost. And there was Rebecca, my sister, still immaculately dressed, though the shine in her hair and the glow in her smile had been replaced by something brittle. At her side clung two children, eyes wide and restless. My niece and nephew, strangers to me. I froze. My fingers hovered over the panel as if I could erase the image, as if turning off the screen would make them vanish back into the graveyard of memory, where they belonged. But they didn't vanish. They were real, standing at my door, looking up at the glass and steel tower I now called home. 20 years. 2 decades of silence. Not a call, not a card, not even an acknowledgement that I existed. I had been the ghost in their photographs, the missing piece in their holiday gatherings. And now, suddenly, they were here, at my doorstep. In the dead of night, I should have felt anger. I should have felt rage at the audacity. But what I felt, first and foremost, was curiosity. Why now? Why after everything? My heart pounded in my chest as I pressed the intercom. My voice was calm, colder than the air outside. Can I help you? There was a pause, and then my mother's voice, thin and trembling, came through the speaker. Rachel, it's us. It's your family. We need to talk. Family. That word, it landed like glass shattering on marble. For 20 years, they made it clear that I was not family. They erased me, cut me out, cast me aside. And yet here they stood, summoning the word as if it could bridge the canyon they had carved. I should have told them to leave. I should have closed the feed, walked back to my desk, and poured another glass of wine. But some buried fragment of the little girl I once was, the child who used to press her face to frosted windows, waiting for parents who never came, me from turning away. With a trembling hand, I unlocked the gate. As the iron doors swung open, I caught one last glimpse of their faces on the camera. Eager, nervous, hopeful. They had no idea what waited for them inside. They had no idea that I had been preparing for this moment, even if I never admitted it to myself. Because to understand what happened that night, why their knock shattered the silence of my life, you have to understand what came before it. You have to understand the house I grew up in, and how a family can look perfect from the outside, while destroying one of their own within its walls. I grew up in a house that, from the outside, looked like the picture of American stability. It was a red brick colonial, with white shutters, a broad front lawn, and a driveway lined with oak trees. People who drove past saw a perfect family. My father, Charles, a respected lawyer in town. My mother, Marianne, the ever-graceful church leader, who organized potlucks and volunteered for every community event. And then there were the children. Daniel, the star quarterback, Rebecca, the beauty queen, and Miracle, the quiet one in the corner. Neighbors would smile at us as we posed for Christmas photos on the front porch. They'd say, "What a beautiful family. You must be so proud." And my parents would beam, their arms draped around Daniel and Rebecca. Me, I was always slightly off to the side, the extra in someone else's story, from as early as I can remember. I knew I wasn't like the others, not because I was different in any way that mattered, but because I was reminded of it every single day. Daniel was 6 years older than me, a natural-born athlete with a grin that could charm an entire stadium. When he scored touchdowns, the entire house lit up. Dad would beam with pride. Mom would host celebratory dinners. Neighbors would drop by with congratulations. Daniel's trophies had their own shelf in the living room, polished weekly. Rebecca, 4 years older, was the golden daughter. Blonde curls, perfect posture, a piano prodigy who played Mozart by 12. She was the kind of girl other mothers compared their daughters to. Every school recital was packed with relatives, every minor achievement documented, celebrated, praised. And then there was me. I was the accident child, though they never used the word out loud. But I felt it in the sighs, the glances, the tone when my name was spoken. My report cards, lined with straight A's, never earned more than a passing nod. "That's what we expect, Rachel," my mother would say, as if excellence from me was an obligation, not an accomplishment. The phrase that haunted my childhood was, "Why can't you be more like your brother?" Or "Why can't you try to be graceful like your sister?" I tried. God, I tried. I learned piano, only to be reminded that Rebecca was playing Mozart when I was still fumbling scales. I joined debate, hoping to impress them, but no matter how far I advanced, Mom and Dad were too busy to attend. One of the sharpest memories I carry is my 9th birthday. I had been counting down for weeks, carefully handwriting invitations for the small party Mom had promised. I woke up early that morning, excitement buzzing in my chest. I came downstairs expecting balloons, cake, friends arriving. Instead, I found my parents at the breakfast table. Daniel already in his football uniform. "There's been a change of plans," my mother said flatly, not even looking at me. "Daniel has a championship game today. We all need to be there for him." "But my friends are coming in 2 hours," I whispered. "Don't be selfish," my father snapped. "This is important for your brother. Family comes first." That phrase, "family comes first," was like a knife. Because in that moment, it was clear. Family came first, but I didn't count as family. I spent that morning calling each of my friends, voice shaking as I told them the party was cancelled. Then I was dragged to Daniel's game, forced to sit in the bleachers while my classmates cheered for him. The crowd roared as he scored the winning touchdown, and I sat there, invisible, my birthday erased. When we got home, there was no cake, no presents, just leftover pizza from Daniel's victory celebration. I ate alone in my room, tears soaking the crust on my plate. Rebecca's cruelty was quieter, sharper. She loved to make me feel small. She'd invite friends over and lock me out of her room, whispering secrets until I entered, then falling silent. She'd borrow my things without asking, return them stained or broken, then look me in the eye and smile. "Rachel's just being dramatic again," she'd tell our parents. And they believed her every time. Daniel wasn't cruel the way Rebecca was. His crime was indifference. He had his own world. Sports, parties, girls. If he noticed my suffering, he never showed it. He never stepped in. And in some ways, that hurt more than Rebecca's taunts. At school, I found solace in books and science. Teachers praised my curiosity, my ability to see patterns others missed. But at home, I was told that book smarts wouldn't get me far. "You'll never succeed if you don't learn to be social, like your sister," my father would say. My accomplishments weren't just ignored, they were diminished. I learned to survive by making myself small, by slipping through the cracks of that house, unseen and unheard. Yet deep down, a seed of defiance grew. If love wasn't going to be given to me, then I would earn freedom instead. Looking back, those years weren't just a childhood, they were training. They taught me how to live without applause, how to stand in shadows while others took the stage. But they also left scars, the kind that whisper in the dark, "You're not enough. You'll never be enough." And the only light in all that darkness came once a month. When someone stepped through our door, who didn't see me as a mistake. That someone was my grandmother. And if you want to understand how I survived the years that followed, you need to know about her. If my childhood home was a theater where I played the role of the unwanted extra, then my grandmother Helen was the only person in the audience who actually saw me. She lived about an hour away, in a small blue house with a vegetable garden in the back, and a front porch that always smelled of lavender. She didn't visit often, once a month, maybe less, but when she did, the air inside our house changed. It was as if someone had opened a window and let light in. From the moment she stepped through the door, she noticed me. Not Daniel, not Rebecca, me. While my parents fussed over my brother's latest game or my sister's newest recital, Grandma would crouch down, look me in the eye, and ask, "So, Rachel, what have you been working on?" And I would show her my science projects, my scribbled notes about constellations, or the stack of library books I had devoured that week. She would listen, genuinely listen, as if my words carried weight. She had this way of making me feel like my curiosity was a gift, not a flaw. I still remember her whisper one summer afternoon as we baked an apple pie together. "You see things differently, Rachel. That's not something to hide. One day, it will set you apart." We had rituals, small but sacred. She'd bring me a new book every visit, sometimes a mystery novel, sometimes a biography of a scientist or explorer. She was the only one who seemed to understand that books weren't my escape, they were my lifeline. When I flipped those pages, I wasn't the overlooked child in a suffocating house. I was a detective, a pioneer, a survivor. She came to every science fair, even the ones my parents skipped. I can still see her standing in the front row, clapping with more pride than anyone else in the room. My father would say, "Science isn't a spectator sport," dismissing my achievements, but Grandma's applause drowned out his absence. One winter, when I was 12, she gave me a small ruby ring. It had belonged to her own grandmother, she said. She slipped it onto my finger and told me, "This is yours now. When the world makes you doubt yourself, wear it, and remember, someone out there believes in you." I wore that ring until it nearly cut off my circulation. In her presence, I wasn't the forgotten child. I was Rachel, the girl with a spark, worth protecting. She filled the cracks my parents carved into me with something resembling love. And for a long time, that was enough to keep me going. But nothing lasts forever. When I was 22, a phone call shattered the fragile world she had built for me. Grandma Helen had died suddenly, a heart attack. I remember the room spinning as my mother delivered the news with a flatness that made me wonder if she was relieved. I packed my bag and flew home for the funeral, grief clawing at me like a wild animal. I thought losing her was the worst pain I would ever feel. I thought standing at her graveside, clutching the ruby ring, was the most brutal moment life could deliver. But I was wrong. Because it was at that funeral, on the day I lost the only ally I had, that my family revealed the truth that destroyed whatever illusions I had left about belonging. The day of Grandma Helen's funeral was gray in a way that seemed scripted, as if even the sky knew it was losing its brightest light. I flew home from college, numb and hollow, clutching the ruby ring she'd given me like a lifeline. It was the only thing keeping me steady as I walked through the heavy church doors. Inside, the pews were filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, faces that blurred together, with whispers of, "I'm so sorry for your loss." My parents sat in the front row, dignified in black, Daniel beside them in a sharp suit, Rebecca with her perfect hair pinned back, looking as though the event were another stage for her to perform on. I sat alone. No one slid over to make space beside them. No one held my hand. I was the granddaughter who had been closest to Helen, yet in that room, I felt like a stranger who had stumbled into the wrong service. The ceremony moved in fragments, hymns, couldn't sing eulogies that barely mentioned the things I loved most about her. A sermon that talked about faith, but not about her laughter, her warmth, her unwavering defense of me. When the pastor finally invited the family forward to view the casket one last time, I stood frozen. I waited until everyone else had gone, until the line of black-clad mourners had thinned, then stepped up alone. Her face was calm, too calm, as if sleep had taken the fire from her eyes. My throat closed as I bent closer, whispering words I knew no one else would ever hear. "You were the only one who saw me, Grandma. I don't know how to do this without you." After the service, everyone filed to my parents' house. The air buzzed with polite conversations, casseroles set down on tables, clinking glasses. It was the same house I had grown up in, unchanged. The trophies still gleamed on Daniel's shelf. Rebecca's framed recital program still lined the hallway. My own science fair ribbons and certificates were nowhere to be seen. They'd disappeared long ago. The reading of the will was scheduled for that afternoon. I didn't expect much, maybe nothing at all. I had loved her, not her possessions. Still, I sat in the corner of the living room, clutching a photo album I'd found on a side table, staring at images of her smile, trying to anchor myself. When the lawyer arrived, the family gathered in the dining room. He was a stiff man in a gray suit, his voice clipped as he read the formal document. My mother inherited Helen's house. My father received financial accounts. Daniel was left her car, Rebecca her jewelry collection. Then the lawyer paused. To my beloved granddaughter, Rachel, he read, his voice softening slightly. I leave my grandmother's ruby ring and the sum of $5,000. Rachel, you are always special to me. I know you will make me proud. The room went silent. I lowered my eyes to the ring, already circling my finger, the one thing that had always connected us. Tears welled. But before I could speak, my mother scoffed. $5,000 and an old ring. That's it. Her tone was sharp, dismissive, as though the gift was an insult. My father's face flushed red. This is outrageous, he muttered. Helen always did spoil Rachel, made her think she was better than she was. Something inside me snapped. For years, I had bitten my tongue, swallowed the slights, buried the wounds. But not this time. Maybe she treated me differently because she was the only one who ever showed me kindness in this family. I said, my voice trembling but steady. The room stilled. My father's eyes turned cold. You want to talk about kindness? He spat. We took you in when no one else would. We gave you a home, an education, opportunities you never would have had otherwise. And this is how you repay us. Confusion crashed over me. Took me in. I repeated, what are you talking about? My mother shot him a warning glance, but he ignored it. The words spilled out like poison. You're not our daughter, Rachel. We adopted you when you were 2. Your mother Mary Ann's college roommate, in a car crash, no father in the picture. No family who wanted you. We took you out of pity. The world tilted, my chest tightened, and I gripped the edge of the table to stay upright. Adopted, I whispered. My voice sounded foreign, hollow. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, her lips curling. Honestly, it makes sense, she said lightly. It explains why you never fit in. You're not really one of us. I turned to my mother, silently pleading for her to deny it. She sighed, eyes tired, as though the truth was an inconvenience. We always meant to tell you, but it never seemed like the right time. 22 years, 2 decades of living as an afterthought, of wondering why I was different, why love never came freely, and this was the reason. Everyone had known but me. My stomach churned. So everyone here knew, except me. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. Rebecca smirked. It wasn't exactly a secret, she said. We just didn't bring it up. Not a secret to them. A secret only to me, the one whose life it actually was. The lawyer cleared his throat, clearly wishing he could vanish. But I wasn't done. So what was I? Then, I demanded. A charity case you regretted. A mistake you couldn't admit to. Silence. The answer was in their faces, in their refusal to look at me, in the way my father's jaw clenched as if restraining contempt. Finally, he stood, towering over me. That's enough. You will not speak to your mother that way under my roof. If you can't show gratitude for what we've done, then leave. My heart pounded, the walls of that house closing in. Gratitude, that word tasted like ash. Gratitude for being erased, diminished, lied to. Gratitude for being treated like less than human. Fine, I'll go. But I want one thing before I leave. Tell me, was anything real? Did you ever love me? Or was I just a burden you regretted carrying? The silence that followed was deafening. No one spoke. No one reached for me. That was all the answer I needed. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The sky outside had darkened into storm clouds, and as the rain began to fall, I knew I had been severed from them forever. What I didn't know then was that this exile wasn't just emotional. It would become official. They would erase me from their lives completely, as though I had never existed at all. When I stepped out of that house after the will reading, I thought the silence that followed would be temporary. Maybe they'd call. Maybe they'd try to explain. Maybe anyone would reach out. But I was wrong. The silence wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. It was the sound of a family erasing me. The first proof came that Thanksgiving. I opened my laptop in my cramped apartment, and there it was, Rebecca's post on social media. A glossy photo of the entire family gathered around a long table, covered in turkey and pies. My parents at the head, Daniel carving meat, Rebecca flashing her perfect smile. The caption read, "So grateful for family today and always." Everyone was there, everyone except me. At first I told myself it was just one photo, but then Christmas came. Another post. The family by the tree, ornaments gleaming. My mother's caption, "Nothing better than having the whole family together for the holidays." My chest tightened. The ornaments on that tree were the very ones I had made in elementary school, little scraps of glitter and glue. But I wasn't part of that memory anymore. It was as if my fingerprints had been scrubbed away. It didn't stop there. Daniel's wedding came and went. I wasn't invited. I only knew about it because I saw the pictures later. My parents, my sister, distant cousins, even neighbors from our street, smiling, clapping, celebrating. A family milestone, and I was invisible. Later, when his first child was born, they posted the announcement online. 3 generations together. The photo showed my parents holding the baby, Rebecca standing proudly beside them. 3 generations, they said. But not me. Not the granddaughter, who had once spent nights baking pies with the only woman who ever loved her. I tried once to bridge the silence. That Christmas, a year after Helen's death, I sent a card. Nothing dramatic, just a simple message. Merry Christmas. I hope you're well. A week later, I got an email from my father. The words were cold, clinical, as if drafted by a lawyer instead of a parent. Rachel, please respect our privacy and refrain from contacting family members. We have moved on with our lives, and we expect you to do the same. Moved on. That was the phrase that gutted me. As if I had been a phase, a bad habit. They'd finally broken. In the years that followed, the pattern continued. Birthdays, anniversaries, baptisms, reunions, each one posted. Each one carefully captioned with phrases like "everyone we love in one place." And every time I saw those words, it felt like another cut. They hadn't just excluded me, had rewritten the story of their family so that I had never existed at all. I became a ghost haunting photographs I wasn't in. Milestones I wasn't part of. A child without parents. A sister without siblings. The strange part was that no one outside our family knew the truth. To the neighbors, to colleagues, to the world, the Morgans still looked perfect. But perfection comes at a cost, and the cost was me. At first, the pain nearly broke me. I questioned who I was, where I belonged, whether I had any worth outside of the people who had discarded me. But as the months turned into years, the pain hardened into resolve. If they could erase me from their world, then I would build a world where they didn't matter. If they could pretend I never existed, then I would create a life so extraordinary that their silence would scream louder than any words. I had no family left, no safety net, no one to catch me if I fell. All I had was $5,000 from Helen's will, a ruby ring on my finger, and a determination forged from every slight, every rejection, every erased birthday. So I left that small town behind. I packed what little I owned, boarded a bus, and arrived in Boston with nothing but a suitcase and a fire in my chest. It was time to build something of my own. When I stepped off that bus in Boston, the city felt like another planet. The skyline was sharp and unwelcoming, the streets slick with winter ice. And I was a nobody, no family, no safety net, just $5,000 from Helen's will. A suitcase with secondhand clothes, and a ruby ring I swore I would never sell. I rented the cheapest apartment I could find. A 1-bedroom split with 2 strangers from a housing board at the public library. My room was barely big enough for a twin bed and a desk, the walls thin enough that I could hear my roommates coughing, laughing, crying. The bathroom faucet leaked all night, and the window rattled with every gust of wind off the harbor. But it was mine. Unlike my childhood home, no one could throw me out of it. The money didn't last long. Rent drained half of it, groceries another piece, and suddenly I was standing in line at a diner, filling out an application for a waitressing job. By day, I worked as a junior lab technician, cleaning equipment and logging data for researchers who barely learned my name. By night, I carried trays of greasy food, smiled for tips, and walked home through streets that reeked of spilled beer. I lived on ramen noodles, peanut butter sandwiches, and coffee that tasted like burnt ash. I cut my own hair in the bathroom, mirror, wore thrift store clothes, walked to save bus fare. Every dollar I saved went into one thing: learning. After my shifts, while others slept, I sat at my desk hunched over a borrowed laptop, teaching myself programming languages, encryption protocols, reading until dawn about cybersecurity and biotech integration. There were nights I thought I wouldn't make it. Nights when my eyes blurred from lack of sleep, when my body shook from exhaustion, when I stared at Helen's ruby ring and whispered, was I crazy to believe I could do this? But every time, something inside me answered back, you've been underestimated your whole life. Prove them wrong. 6 months into this exile, I attended a free workshop at the library on emerging cyber threats. I almost didn't go. My waitress shift had run late. My shoes were soaked through from snow, but something pushed me inside. The presenter was Dr. Anaya Patel, a renowned professor from MIT. She spoke with clarity and urgency about vulnerabilities in medical databases, about the dangers of digital sabotage in hospitals. Most people listened passively, but I scribbled notes furiously. When she finished, I gathered my courage and approached her with a question about encryption layers. She looked at me, truly looked, and said, "That's a sharp observation. Are you working in the field?" I told her my story, carefully edited, leaving out the family betrayal. She listened, and for the first time since Helen, I felt seen by someone who mattered. She handed me her card. "Keep studying. You have a mind for this. Come to my hackathon next month." That hackathon changed everything. I joined a team of stranger students, coders, engineers. We were tasked with finding weaknesses in a prototype banking app. I worked for 30 hours straight, fueled by vending machine snacks and adrenaline, and I was the one who spotted a flaw that could have cost millions. Our solution won third place, but more importantly, it caught attention. Dr. Patel pulled me aside afterward. "You see vulnerabilities others miss," she told me, "because you think differently. That's your advantage." Her words lit a fire. I began sketching out an idea, a new kind of data protection system, not based on static passwords, but on behavioral patterns. How a person typed, moved a mouse, even how they hesitated before clicking. It was unproven, but I believed in it, with the same desperation I had once believed my family might love me. Turning that concept into reality meant money, and money meant investors. I prepared a business plan, practiced pitches in front of the cracked mirror in my apartment, rehearsed until my voice went hoarse. Dr. Patel introduced me to her contacts, but the responses were brutal. "Interesting idea, but you have no track record. Come back with a prototype. We invest in proven founders, not people like you, people like me." Those words dug in deep. I left conference rooms with polite smiles, masking humiliation, tears burning my throat. I was rejected 20 times in 3 months, but rejection was familiar. I'd been rejected since the day I was born. And if I had learned anything from my family, it was that being dismissed could either destroy you or fuel you. I chose fuel. To survive, I picked up a second job bartending at a trendy tech hangout. By day, I still scrubbed lab glassware. By night, I poured drinks for people who lived the lives I wanted. Venture capitalists, engineers, startup founders. It was torture, smiling while they bragged about deals worth millions. But it was also opportunity. I listened. I learned how they talked, what they valued, what they dismissed. One night, a man named Travis ordered a whiskey neat. He struck up a conversation about digital privacy, and I couldn't help myself. I challenged one of his points, laying out my theory on behavioral authentication. He raised an eyebrow. The next week he came back, asked me more questions. This went on for weeks, until one night he finally said, "I've been testing you. You're not just talk. Show me your plan." 2 weeks later, he wired me $200,000. It wasn't enough to build an empire, but it was enough to quit the lab, reduce my bartending hours, and rent a tiny office space with flickering fluorescent lights. That office became my battlefield. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. The code fought back, errors multiplying, security protocols failing. Some nights, I broke down, head on the desk, sobbing with frustration. But every time, I put the ring on my finger, whispered Helen's words, "You have a spark, Rachel. Don't let it go out," and started again. After 8 months, I had a prototype. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Travis arranged a demonstration for real investors. My hands shook as I clicked through the slides, but when I showed them, the system catching a spoofed login attempt in real time, the room shifted. Their eyes lit up. This could change everything. One of them said, "That day, I secured enough funding to hire 3 employees, move into a proper office, and put a name to the dream." Biohaven was born. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving, I was building. From ashes, from nothing, from the very rejection that was meant to destroy me, was creating an empire. But success is a strange companion. Even as the contracts started coming in, even as our technology made headlines, I would go home at night to an empty apartment. The silence pressing in like it always had, because winning the world didn't fill the hole that family had left behind. Bio grew faster than I could have imagined. What started in a dim office with flickering lights and second-hand furniture turned into something people in Silicon Valley whispered about. Our behavioral authentication system was hailed as answer to the growing crisis of data theft. Within 3 years, Fortune 500 companies signed contracts with us. Tech magazines put my name in bold headlines. the woman who saw the future of security. I was invited to conferences, asked to sit on panels, photographed in boardrooms with men twice my age, who finally had to admit I wasn't just a girl with big talk. Money poured in. Enough to pay off debts, to hire a team that believed in my vision, to scale into a sleek downtown office overlooking the harbor. The staff grew from 3 to 15, then 50, then hundreds. Each new face carried the same spark I had once seen in Helen's eyes. The hunger to build something that mattered. On the outside, it looked like I had everything. I moved out of the leaky apartment and into a luxury condo with glass walls and polished marble floors. I traded thrift store jackets for tailored suits, public buses for a Tesla, instant noodles for reservations at restaurants where waitlists stretched for months. My bank account no longer frightened MIT, frightened other people. I had arrived. But when the applause faded, when the conferences ended, and the cameras turned off, I returned each night to silence. A silence louder than it had ever been in that childhood house where I was forgotten. I would walk through the condo 3 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling views of the skyline, and feel the emptiness pressing in from the walls. There was no laughter spilling down hallways, no voices calling my name, just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the faint reflection of myself in the glass dot. Sometimes I would scroll through social media, a habit I tried to break but always slipped back into. Rebecca would post pictures of family barbecues, Daniel of his children's birthdays, captions read, "Whole family together," or "Nothing more important than family." Each post was a dagger, not because I wanted to be there, but because I was reminded again that I never would be. I hosted company celebrations in our office, champagne spraying, employees hugging each other in joy when we hit milestones. And then I went home alone, where the echo of popping corks faded into the stillness of a condo that never felt like a home. On the 5th anniversary of Biohaven's founding, we landed our biggest deal yet, a $200 million contract, with a consortium of international banks. The office erupted in cheers. I announced bonuses, watched tears of gratitude in my employees' eyes. Cameras flashed as I shook hands with executives who once dismissed me. That night, the headlines called me the security queen. But when the celebration ended and the office emptied, I went back to my condo, opened a bottle of wine, and sat on the balcony overlooking the harbor. The lights of the city blinked below me like stars. For the first time in years, I let myself wonder, was this it? Was this the summit I had been climbing toward? I thought about Helen, about how she told me one day I would shine. I thought about the family who cast me aside, about how every triumph of mine was born from their rejection. And yet, staring out at the glittering skyline, I felt hollow. Success had given me everything they said I'd never have, but it hadn't filled the emptiness they left behind. The world saw a woman with power, wealth, and influence. What they didn't see was that behind the glass walls of my empire, I was still that girl eating birthday pizza alone in her room. And it was in that hollow silence, on the night of our greatest victory, that the past began to creep back. Because success has a way of drawing out ghosts, and the ones I had buried 20 years ago were about to knock on my door. It happened on a night that should have been ordinary. A Sunday, quiet, the kind of evening I had learned to treasure after long weeks of board meetings, flights, and negotiations. I was still in my silk pajamas, nursing a cup of tea on the balcony of my penthouse, the city humming faintly below me. The harbor lights shimmered, and for once, I let myself believe I had built peace. Then the chime of the doorbell shattered. At first, I thought it was a mistake. No one came unannounced. Security downstairs screened every visitor. But the chime rang again, and a sense of unease crawled up my spine. I set down my cup, walked across polished marble floors, and tapped the panel on the wall. What I saw made my breath hitch. On the security camera stood for figures I knew better than my own. Reflection, though time had left its fingerprints on them. My father, Charles, once so commanding, now stooped, his hair a thinned halo of white. My mother, Marianne, her face lined but her posture still carrying that self-important air I remembered. My brother Daniel, heavier now, his athletic build, surrendered to middle age, eyes darting as though already anticipating rejection. And Rebecca still immaculately dressed, blonde hair cut into a sharp bob streaked with highlights. But the confidence she once weaponized had thinned into something brittle. Beside her stood 2 children, a boy about 10, a girl around 8, both clinging to their mother's hands, staring up at the gates of the life I had built without them. For a moment, I simply stared. 20 years of silence, of erasure, of photographs where I had been edited out. And now here they were summoned by something they thought more powerful than pride. Desperation. My hand trembled as I pressed the intercom. "Can I help you?" There was a pause, then my mother's voice, thinner than I remembered, cracked through the speaker. "Rachel, it's us. It's your family. We were hoping to talk." Family. That word, spoken by the woman who had once told me to move on with my life, tasted like poison. I should have closed the panel, walked away, and let them stand there until the cold swallowed them. But curiosity gnawed at me. What could possibly drag them here, after all this time? I pressed the button to open the gate. Minutes later, the doorbell rang again. I opened it to find them on my doorstep, their faces tilted upward, at the facade of glass and steel. Awe flickered in their eyes, thinly veiled by forced smiles. "You look wonderful," my mother said quickly, arms outstretched, as if 2 decades of silence could be bridged with a single embrace. I stepped back, avoiding her reach. "Thank you," I said coolly. "This is unexpected." They filed inside, their gazes darting over the marble floors, the chandelier, the art on the walls. Daniel let out a low whistle. "Quite a place you've got here." I led them into the living room, its floor-toozling windows framing the city lights. The children moved shyly around the edges of the room, their small hands brushing over the leather couches, eyes wide at the expanse. "Coffee? Water?" I asked, my tone practiced, polite. "Coffee would be lovely," my mother said, perching on the sofa's edge like a guest who didn't know whether she was welcome. I left them there, retreating to the kitchen. My hands gripped the counter as I tried to steady myself. I had imagined this moment countless times, fantasies of what I'd say, how I'd stand tall while they begged for scraps of my attention. Now that it was here, reality felt sharper, more dangerous. When I returned with a tray of porcelain cups, silence clung to the room. The children sat close to Rebecca. My father leaned forward, clasping his hands, his lawyer's poise still intact. Despite the slump of his shoulders, my mother spoke first, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. "We've missed you, Rachel. We've thought about you all these years." I set the tray down. "Have you?" I asked. Because in 20 years, not once did I receive a birthday card. Not one Christmas greeting. Not even an email. So forgive me if I have trouble believing you've thought of me. My father cleared his throat, his eyes flicking down. "After the way things ended, we didn't know if you wanted to hear from us. You could have tried," I said simply. "I've lived in the same city for over a decade. My company is hardly hidden. If you wanted to find me, you would have." Daniel shifted in his seat. We have been following your career. We've read about your success. We're proud of you." Proud. That word stung worse than silence. "Now you're proud?" I asked, my voice soft but cutting. "Not when I graduated with honors. Not when I worked 3 jobs to survive. Not when I fought to build this from nothing. Only now, when I have a penthouse and a billion-dollar company." "Now you're proud." No one answered. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. The children huddled closer to Rebecca, sensing the tension in the room. I folded my arms. "Why are you here?" The silence stretched until my father finally spoke. His voice was lower now, weighted with something that might have been shame. "We need your help." There it was, the truth behind the midnight knock. "What kind of help?" I asked, though I already knew. "Financial," he admitted. "The firm collapsed after the recession. At my age, finding new work, it's nearly impossible. I've been," he stopped, swallowed, forced the word out. "Bankrupt." Daniel rubbed his temples. "I lost my job 6 months ago. I've been freelancing, but it's not enough. And I'm going through a divorce." Rebecca's eyes flicked to her children before dropping to the floor. Her voice was tight. "Harold left me for his secretary. The divorce settlement is dragging out. Legal fees are overwhelming." The air thickened. Each confession fell like a stone in the room. I looked at them one by one, the same people who had cast me aside without hesitation. Now they had come crawling back, dressed in desperation. My father leaned forward, hope flickering in his eyes. "We were thinking, perhaps you could help us restart the family business. A loan $2 million would be enough to get it off the ground again. You could be a silent partner. It would secure the children's future. Keep it in the family." That word again, family, used now as a bargaining chip. I looked at my niece and nephew. Their eyes were wide, innocent, unknowing. They hadn't chosen this. They hadn't been part of the cruelty. But the adults had chosen every step. I set down my cup carefully, letting the silence grow heavy. "I see," I said at last, their faces lit with cautious hope, mistaking my calm for agreement. But what they didn't know was that I had been preparing for this moment all my life. Because if they thought they could walk into my home, after 20 years of silence, and appeal to some fantasy of family loyalty, they were about to discover how deeply wrong they were. I let the silence hang for a moment, their eyes fixed on me with barely concealed hunger. My father's hand twitched as if he wanted to reach across the table, to seal some imagined deal, before I could change my mind. But I had no intention of playing the desperate daughter, finally welcomed back into the fold. Slowly, deliberately, I rose from my seat. "There's something I'd like to show you," I said, my voice steady, almost to calm. Confusion rippled across their faces as I crossed the room. I pulled open a cabinet, slid out a black leather folder, and set it down. On the glass coffee table, its weight landed with a dull thud that made Rebecca flinch. "What's that?" Daniel asked, trying to sound casual, but his voice cracked at the edges. I opened the folder. Inside were sheets of paper, photographs, old letters, and clippings. The kind of file a detective might build over years of tracking a suspect. Only this case wasn't about strangers. It was about them. I lifted the first page. It was a copy of my high school graduation photo, the original one. Me in my cap and gown, smiling wide, despite the bruise hidden under makeup from the night before. I turned it toward them. "Remember this?" I asked softly. My mother blinked, of course. "Darling." I slid another photo onto the table. The edited version, the one I had discovered years later, in a dusty box someone had carelessly left behind. Same graduation, same backdrop. But I wasn't in it. My image had been cut out, as though I had never stood there. "Funny," I said. "In this one, I don't exist." Rebecca's face tightened. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. My father pressed his lips together. No one spoke. I kept going, page after page. Birthday cards given to Rebecca and Daniel, but never to me. Holiday photographs where I had been erased or cropped. Letters from family friends, praising my siblings' accomplishments, with my name conspicuously absent. I pulled out one final piece. A Christmas photo from years ago. The whole family smiling around the tree. Rebecca holding a golden retriever puppy with a bow. My chair at the edge of the picture was empty. "You told people I wasn't home that year, that I'd chosen not to come." I tapped the photo, but I was right there, just outside the frame, holding the camera. "You erased me with a single snip." My voice shook not from weakness, but from the sheer force of holding everything in for 2 decades. "Do you know what it feels like to be alive, but treated as though you're already dead? To be erased not by strangers, but by your own blood." Rebecca opened her mouth, closed it again. My father leaned forward, hands trembling now. "Rachel, that was a mistake." "We know," I cut him off. "It wasn't a mistake, it was a choice. You wanted a narrative where I didn't exist, where your golden children shined without a shadow, and you lived comfortably in that lie, until the lie no longer paid the bills." The children beside Rebecca shifted uneasily. They didn't understand the full weight of what was happening, but they could sense the venom in the air. I softened my tone slightly. "Not for the adults, but for those small, wide-eyed faces. Your mother and uncle may have forgotten me, but I never forgot what they did." Daniel exhaled sharply, anger flashing in his eyes. "You've been holding on to this for 20 years. You're seriously digging up old photos to prove some point." I met his glare without blinking. "This isn't about proving a point. It's about truth. You all came here tonight pretending that nothing happened, pretending that I'm some safety net you can fall back on. But the truth is, every scar I carry, every sleepless night, every desperate climb from nothing, it all traces back to this folder." I closed the file with a decisive snap. The sound echoed through the room like a gavel striking down dot. No one moved. My father's hand hovered in the air, then fell limp against his knee. My mother's eyes darted to the folder, then away, as if it were radioactive. Rebecca clutched her children closer. For the first time that night, I allowed myself a small, cold smile. "So now tell me again, why should I believe you came here out of love, and not out of greed?" The silence was suffocating. The city lights flickered against the windows behind me, and in their reflection, I saw my family looking not like saviors or victims, but exactly what they were. People who had written me out of their story, until my success forced me back into theirs. I leaned back, folded my arms, and waited. Their next words would reveal everything. I let the silence linger after snapping the folder shut. It wasn't just silence, it was judgment, the kind that weighs heavier than any words. They had no defense left, only shame dressed up as indignation. For the first time, I realized I had the upper hand. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, lowering my voice, so they had to lean in to catch every word. You came here expecting me to welcome you back with open arms. You rehearsed your lines, maybe even believed them. But you forgot something. This isn't your stage anymore. It's mine. And if you want a part in my life, you'll play by my rules. My father stiffened. He didn't like being told where he stood, but he stayed quiet. He had to because deep down, he knew the truth. Rebecca scoffed, though her voice wavered. So what? You want us to beg? That's your revenge. To humiliate us. I met her eyes. No, Rebecca, my revenge was surviving without you. My revenge was thriving while you all convinced yourselves I'd never make it. But tonight isn't about revenge. It's about terms. I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. Then I stood, walking slowly around the room, circling them the way a prosecutor circles the witness stand. If you want my help, if you want my money, you'll have to agree to conditions. Daniel frowned. Conditions? You've got to be kidding. I stopped behind him, close enough that he flinched when I spoke. I never kid, Daniel. Not about this. I laid it out, clear and cold. First, you will acknowledge, out loud and in writing, everything you did to erase me. Every photo cut, every story rewritten, every dinner where you pretended I wasn't in the room. You'll confess it to me, and then you'll confess it to yourselves. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Rachel, please. I raised my hand to silence her. Second, if you want me to save you, then you don't get to live in my house, or wear my success like it's your second skin. You'll work. Every cent I provide will come with responsibility attached. You'll earn your keep under my watch. And if you break that trust once, you're out for good. Rebecca's eyes widened. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious. I turned to face all of them, my voice rising. And third, you will never again try to paint me as unworthy, broken, or less than you. If you want me in your lives, you'll speak my name with the respect I've earned. Not the pity you once threw my way like scraps from your table. The room went still. They looked at each other, searching for someone brave enough to protest. No one moved. I sat back down and folded my arms. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. But let me make one thing clear. There will be no negotiation. Daniel laughed bitterly, but there was no real power behind it. This is insane. You sound like a dictator. I tilted my head. No, I sound like someone who finally understands her worth. My father's voice cracked when he finally spoke. Rachel, we're family. I locked eyes with him, steady and unblinking. Family isn't about blood. It's about loyalty. And you lost that a long time ago. I could see it land, like a blade driven into the table between us. Their empire of excuses was crumbling, brick by brick, and all they could do was sit there and watch it fall. I leaned back, exhaling, as if the air itself had shifted. So, what's it going to be? My terms, or nothing? No one answered right away. But in their silence, I already had my answer, and deep down, I knew the next move wouldn't come from them, it would come from me. Because if they thought these terms were harsh, they hadn't yet seen the full weight of what I was capable of. I didn't sleep that night. Their faces stayed with me, the mixture of defiance, shame, and something else I couldn't quite name. For years, I had carried the weight of their judgment like shackles around my ankles. But now, after drawing my line in the sand, I felt something new, the faint hum of freedom. I sat in my study as dawn crept through the blinds. The city outside was alive, but I was quieter than I'd ever been. My mind kept circling back to one question. Had I really broken free, or was I still tethered to them by invisible chains? For so long, every decision I made was, in some way, shaped by the need to prove them wrong. Every contract signed, every milestone achieved, it was all shadowed by their absence. Their rejection, their ghostly presence in my life. I thought success would erase them, but I was wrong. Success only sharpened their outline, as if the brighter my light, the darker their shadows became. That morning, though, something shifted. I realized that breaking the chains didn't just mean standing up to them in my living room. It meant going deeper, cutting ties with the parts of myself that still craved their approval. The little girl who waited at the dinner table for a seat that never came. The teenager who begged for scraps of recognition. The young woman who thought silence was safer than speaking. She had to be laid to rest. I opened a drawer and pulled out a box I hadn't touched in years. Inside were fragments of a past I had both cherished and despised. An old school essay with my grandmother's proud handwriting in the margin. A torn family photo where my face had been carefully cut out. A birthday card I had once hidden under my pillow because it was the only one addressed to me. Piece by piece, I set them on the desk, and with a steady hand, I struck a match. The flame caught quickly, curling paper into ash, turning memories into smoke. I watched them burn, not with anger, but with clarity. These weren't keepsakes anymore. They were chains, and as the last ember faded, I felt lighter. For the first time, my story no longer belonged to them. It belonged to me. My life wasn't a rebuttal to their cruelty, or a mirror of their neglect. It was mine, built by my choices, my resilience, my refusal to disappear. And yet, even as I released the past, I knew the story wasn't over. The fire had cleansed something inside me, but the fight ahead was far from finished. Because freedom wasn't just about letting go, was about standing tall when they tried to drag me back. And soon enough they would. For years, I thought family was a fixed thing, a word carved in stone, handed to you at birth, unchangeable no matter how much it cut or bruised you. I thought blood alone defined it, that I was doomed to carry the title of daughter, sister, outsider, no matter how cruelly they wielded it. But, walking away that night, after burning the relics of my past, I began to realize something I should have known all along. Family isn't built by the people who share your last name. It's built by the people who choose to stand beside you. When the world goes dark, I saw it in the loyal colleagues who celebrated my victories like they were their own. I saw it in the quiet neighbor who brought me soup when I worked through fevers alone. I saw it in the few friends who didn't care about my success, only about whether I was okay. These weren't people bound to me by obligation. They were bound by choice, by kindness, by love that asked nothing in return. It was a revelation that shook me. For so long, I chased the ghost of a family who never wanted me, when all along, I was surrounded by fragments of something real, something far stronger than DNA. Family, I realized, is not about bloodlines, but about lifelines. It's about the people who see you, who refuse to let you vanish into the shadows, who remind you that your existence matters. Grandma Helen had been my first glimpse of that truth, but she wasn't the last. And once I understood that, the grip my parents and siblings had on me weakened even more. Their betrayal no longer defined me. Their absence was no longer a wound I carried like a scarlet letter. They weren't my beginning, and they certainly weren't my end. By redefining family, I redefined myself. I wasn't the abandoned child anymore. I was a woman who had built her own circle of belonging, forged in trust and respect. And that was something they could never take away. Still, as freeing as that truth was, I knew my story wasn't finished. Because closing the door on them wasn't enough. The past had one more reckoning left. One final confrontation that would test everything I had learned about strength, forgiveness, and what it means to finally heal. Scars are strange things. At first, you hate them because they remind you of everything you lost. But with time, you start to see them differently. They stop being marks of pain and start becoming proof of survival. When I look back now, I don't see a victim anymore. I see someone who walked barefoot through fire and came out standing. The betrayal, the exile, the loneliness, it carved me into someone who refuses to be invisible. And while those wounds never fully disappear, they remind me of the strength I carry, the voice I earned, and the truth I will never let anyone erase again. I used to believe closure meant reconciliation. That one day they would apologize, invite me back, or finally give me the love I spent years craving. But closure, I've learned, isn't something someone else hands you. It's something you build with your own hands. Even if your fingers are trembling. I've built mine out of ashes and scars. Out of late nights, where I chose peace over bitterness. Out of mornings, where I decided to begin again, instead of breaking. And that choice, that persistence is what truly defines me. If there's one thing my story proves, it's that family doesn't have to break you. You can choose what to carry forward, and what to leave behind. You can write a new definition, for yourself, one rooted in love, loyalty, and truth. And as I close this chapter, I know the echoes of my past will never vanish completely, but I no longer fear them. I've learned that scars don't make you weaker, they make you undeniable. Because in the end, this isn't a story about being abandoned. It's a story about becoming whole. In the end, scars are not just reminders of pain, they are proof that we survived, proof that we are still here. My story is finished, but the echoes of it will never fade. And maybe, just maybe, it will remind someone else out there that survival is its own kind of victory. If this story spoke to you, take a moment to leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive and it means more than you know.